I had to ponder the fact that I didn't know what to write about for this video. I saw the Thunderbolts and was blown away. So when I arrived home and got ready to write a script, I felt lost for words. I wanted to talk about so much that felt so right about this movie, but the problem is that I couldn't for the life of me focus on one character because I was wowed by so many aspects of this film that I felt like I couldn't prioritize a specific character. So I'm actually going to try talking about everything I want to in the how to write style, but all in one video. I've narrowed down my thoughts and explanations down to the escalation of John Walker's character, Yelena's progression, and of course my favorite aspect of this film. But we will get back to that later. So instead of having a long intro, just remember that YouTubers like it when you like, comment, and subscribe, so do those things and let's just get started on the first segment of this video about how John Walker teaches us how to redeem a character. So I'm not going to act like I loved Falcon and the Winter Soldier. It's a fine show at best, but I've always been a big fan of the idea of John Walker. You see, a small aspect to why the Thunderbolts shocked me overall was that it reminded me a lot of one of my favorite shows right now, The Boys, where you don't necessarily have a good guy, but you have guys that are better than others. John Walker is that guy in this new movie, now that he has more of a time to shine. In the show, he was an anti-hero. He had the will to be Captain America and he had the skill, but his way of executing his plans wasn't the same, which made him unpopular. Now, in the Thunderbolts, aka spoiler alert, 3, 2, 1, the new Avengers, we get to see John's life after the events of the show, where we learn his kid was taken away from him and that he's still haunted by his past actions. What I like about John is he doesn't actually say he regrets what he did, but the audience pieces together that he regrets it through his flashback and later on when it's revealed his kid was taken away from him. You see him earlier just trying to get through life like how Yelena was, feeling about permission. But then you come to understand that John isn't void of trying to help because he was picked to be the new Captain America for a reason. In the end, John having a character redemption works when we understand his perspective of what he went through from being an anti-hero to an underdog hero. Alright, now let's talk about Yelena and how she teaches us how to progress a character arc. Coming from Black Widow, Yelena never really got a big moment to shine, even with her feature in the Hawkeye series, because she never was the main character. After all that time, Yelena gets the spotlight finally, and has the chance to develop her character even more, and that's something I appreciated about her. During Hawkeye, she wasn't someone we were supposed to be rooting for, and even in the beginning of the movie, she's committing a terrorist attack. In no situation should we be able to go from blowing up a building holding an experiment that could revolutionize the world to sympathetic main character, but somehow they do, and it's simple how they did it. You see, Valentina is the bigger bad in this scenario. We find out that Yelena is actually destroying property with permission from the owner, who we find out is on the verge of impeachment after being accused of taking desperate people off the streets and experimenting on them. So in a way, it takes some negative reception off of Yelena since she's just following orders by someone else who's giving her permission to destroy her work. But we find out progressively through the political side plot that Valentina is no saint, and instead is a narcissist that's trying to fight correct allegations. This also helps us learn more about Yelena as a person too, since she does her whole operation with a blank face and shows up to her dad's a year later crying about how she hates her life. Unlike John, we learn that Yelena has deep regret for what she does really early on in this movie, since she is responsible for the death of her childhood friend, Anya. To explain a little bit more about what regret can do to a person, Yelena is feeling depressed, feeling like there's nowhere left to go, and although a sensitive topic, is hinted to be thinking of Odysseus spelt backwards. Her regret strengthens her character arc now that she doesn't have Scarlett Johansson to fall back on, and explains why she sounds so miserable all the time. It gives her a purpose to be the main character, especially when she is able to understand the main villain of this movie, but I don't want to talk about you-know-who for a small segment only to talk about him again in a moment, so we're gonna have to skip over his portion of the movie until we get to Yelena and Alexi's talk in the very end. Their talk drives home the messaging of this movie with how, although you may feel like nothing and feel you don't matter, everyone has a purpose no matter how hard you may have messed up in the past. Yelena's choice to face the literal darkness is the moment I knew this movie had a clear grasp on what it wanted to be, and proved to me that Yelena is a developed enough character to lead a film and a gang of misfits. If Yelena was not included in this film, I don't think the morals and plot of the story would have been able to get off its feet, even though I'm sure some of the other characters besides Taskmaster could lead their own film. Now, it's the moment you've all been waiting for. How to write a character out of a movie. Yeah, so Taskmaster just dies immediately after having her face get shown to the audience. Now, if you haven't picked it up, this isn't the main thing I wanted to talk about, but it's it's really funny that Taskmaster, oh my god, Taskmaster is a part of a lot of the marketing of the movie, only to be killed after a minute of being on screen. It's clearly a comedic choice, and it works pretty well since more characters to the story wouldn't have gone over well since, Ghost wasn't really developed that well, and also seems to show the audience that this movie is gonna throw some punches, that people you might have thought had plot armor might actually not. So it sets up a good shocking moment to show that no one is in. Hey, and speaking of... Omni-Man, the Superman equivalent who actually turns out to be a not cool dude? And while we're at it, Homelander, the Superman equivalent who actually turns out to be a not cool dude? Well, something that may be my favorite plot point of the entire Thunderbolts movie was that Marvel introduces the Superman equivalent who actually turns out to be a not cool dude. So let's finally talk about how Sentry/Bob teaches us how to write a twisted villain. Now, keep in mind that although Bob is technically Sentry, the dark version of him we see later is only a fragment of Bob's depressed mind and not who he actually is. We talked about Odysseus spelled backwards earlier, but we find out that Bob is also very depressed, since he assigns himself up for an experiment to make him a better version of himself. Within a very short amount of time, though, Bob gains powers stronger than any other Avenger. This film explores the fact that Bob is unstable. He was born from Ox to be the hero, but after exploitation became the villain. He turns on Valentina and Yelena even after both of them tried to help him out, even if it was for their own personal gain. We're also given glimpses of his life when we enter his mind and see the stages he goes through, from being in a toxic household, struggling with addiction, and finally giving up and trying to find purpose with Ox's experimentation. Bob's struggle is characterized by this thing called the Void, which turns out to be the literal darker side of his subconscious, and the one that takes over when Bob realizes he can't trust anyone after being almost killed. If you haven't picked it up already, Thunderbolts is all about mental health. Its main messaging, and a way all these characters relate to each other, is that they're tired of feeling like crap all of the time. Bob's characterization leads him down the path that once he feels there is no one left he can trust, he loses his will to live and gives into the voices, which is a metaphor for Odysseus backwards. The thing with the Thunderbolts is that Odysseus and the voices are characterized by the Void, being negative space in every shot it's in to emphasize the emptiness Bob/Sentry feels, and that on the outside there is nothing left to save. On the inside though, we find out more about Bob and his household and addiction problems until we actually meet the Void. Bob standing up to the Void and starting to beat it up confused me at the time, because Bob's happy side was being consumed by the Void as well while he was doing that. After a couple of minutes of reflecting on the movie, I realized that if Bob were to have killed the Void, he would have basically committed Odysseus, and if he turned into the Void while he destroyed the Void, he would be lost forever too. Thankfully, Bob is held back by the Thunderbolt team and is able to reverse the damage that's done in the real world, but sadly, just because it's reversed doesn't mean that the Void is gone. The Void and Bob are the same person, but they're two different consciousnesses in one body, and destroying one for good would be destroying the other. But the message overall is that people can control their darker sides. Scars are permanent, but they can heal and can be managed carefully, which is what Bob is doing by not using his new powers again. I'm sure later down the line the Void will return, but the cost could be horrifying and should only be used for when something big happens, wink wink, nudge nudge, clears throat, Avengers Doomsday, and Secret Wars. Overall, after talking about everything I could possibly want to talk about with this movie, I just want to say that I am ecstatic that this movie is able to subvert the usual Marvel formula and deliver one of the best Marvel movies since Endgame. I'm still willing to fight and say that Guardians 3 was a tad bit better, but that's not a diss to Thunderbolts because I am purely wowed and wouldn't have it any other way even if it had a slow second start in the beginning. The reason I didn't break up this video into 3 was the fact that Marvel stuff on this channel doesn't do the best, and if this video only gets 1,000 views in its lifetime, at least I won't feel like I lost the opportunity to talk about everything I adored about the character work in this movie. Hey, also make sure to like and subscribe for more Marvel content if you actually want it, and comment what you thought of the Thunderbolts because I'm always curious to see how others reacted. With that said, thank you everybody for watching. I'm Enchanted. Bye.